Hello everybody and welcome back. This is yours truly, B9400. Today's episode will be discussing the evolution of Hong Kong as a British colony, which officially began in 1841 and ultimately concluded in 1997, when the British officially handed the territory of Hong Kong over to the People's Republic of China in the summer of 1997. So let's get into it, shall we? British Empire's acquisition of Hong Kong can be traced back to the early 19th century during a time of rising European imperialism and increasing trade with China. The Opium Wars, which officially began in 1839 and ultimately concluded in 1842, and then, by the time it was 1856, started again, then concluded 4 years later in 1860, was central to this process. In the early 1800s, Britain had a major trade deficit with China, largely due to its demand for Chinese tea, silk, and porcelain, while China showed little interest in British goods. To balance this trade, British merchants began smuggling opium into China from British-controlled nearby India. The Chinese government, recognizing the social and economic damage opium was causing, took measures to curtail the trade, leading to tensions with Britain. The First Opium War erupted in 1839, and after China's defeat, the Treaty of Nanking was signed in 1842. As part of this treaty, China ceded Hong Kong Island to Great Britain in perpetuity. This acquisition was further expanded following the Second Opium War and the 1860 Treaty of Peking, modern-day Beijing, which granted Britain the Kowloon Peninsula. Finally, in 1898, Britain obtained a 99-year lease over the new territories, vast rural areas that made up the bulk of Hong Kong's landmass, thus Hong Kong becoming a fully fledged British colony. In the early years, Hong Kong was not much more than a small fishing village, but under British rule, it transformed into a thriving international port and commercial center. Its deepwater harbor made it an ideal trading hub for British interests in Asia, particularly in shipping and finance. The colony's economy was driven by free trade policies, which attracted a diverse population of Chinese laborers, merchants, and foreign traders. By the late 19th century, Hong Kong had become a critical outpost for British trade, especially with China. The city's importance as a port led to rapid urbanization. Major infrastructure projects, such as the construction of roads, government buildings, and railways were launched, and industries such as textiles, shipping, and banking flourished. During the early 20th century, Hong Kong also became a refuge for Chinese immigrants, fleeing political unrest in mainland China. Particularly after events such as the Taiping Rebellion, which started in 1850 and ultimately concluded 14 years later in 1864, and the collapse of the Qing dynasty in 1911. The influx of people contributed to its economic growth, but it also created tensions over resources, housing, and jobs. Hong Kong was governed by a British-appointed governor, and the colonial administration was heavily British in composition and character. The local Chinese population had little representation or influence in the colonial government, which was often seen as aloof from the concerns of the majority Chinese populace. Despite this, the British legal system, rule of law, and the institutions created a relatively stable environment. Education expanded, with English and Cantonese schools forming the foundation of a bilingual society. However, the majority of the Chinese population remained excluded from the political decision-making process, and social hierarchies based on race and class were deeply ingrained. Hong Kong's colonial journey was interrupted by a major challenge during the Second World War, where in December of 1941, just after the attack on the American military base at Pearl Harbor in Hawaii, Japanese forces invaded Hong Kong despite fierce resistance. The British garrison surrendered on Christmas Day of that year, marking the beginning of a brutal 3.5-year occupation. During this time, Hong Kong's infrastructure and economy were devastated, and its populace endured great suffering under Japanese rule. After the defeat of Imperial Japan in 1945, Great Britain swiftly reasserted control over the territory of Hong Kong. In the post-war period, the colony's economy rebounded rapidly, fueled by a wave of industrialization and migration, with the communist takeover of China in 1949 under Mao Zedong. Many businesses and capital fled to Hong Kong, further boosting its economic growth. Over the next few decades, Hong Kong became one of the four Asian tigers, known for its high growth rates, rapid industrialization, and financial expansion. By the 1970s and 1980s, Hong Kong's status as a British colony began to face a new set of challenges. The colony's 99-year lease over the new territories was set to expire in the summer of 1997, raising questions about its future. At the same time, China's leadership under Deng Xiaoping was pursuing economic reforms and opening up to the world, making Hong Kong an even more valuable asset than it already was. And in the early 1980s, the British government under Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher, a Tory, began negotiations with China over Hong Kong's future. These discussions were complex as Britain sought to maintain control over the colony while China was determined to regain sovereignty. China, under its one country, two systems policy, promised that Hong Kong could retain its capitalist economy, legal system, and freedoms for 50 years after the handover. However, on the other hand, in 1984, the Sino-British Joint Declaration was signed. This historic agreement stipulated that Hong Kong would return to Chinese sovereignty on the 1st of July of 1997, but that it would maintain a high degree of autonomy under the one country, two systems framework, as outlined by the People's Republic of China. On the 30th of June 1997 at midnight, Hong Kong was officially handed over to China, ending more than 150 years of British colonial rule. The handover ceremony was a globally significant event, symbolizing the end of an era and the beginning of a new chapter for the territory of Hong Kong and its people. British colonialism left a profound mark on Hong Kong's legal, political, and social systems. The rule of law, independent judiciary, and civil liberties such as freedom of speech and assembly became key pillars of Hong Kong's identity. British influence can also be seen in the city's architecture, education system, and of course, its continued use of the English language as one of its official languages, after Cantonese, first and foremost. At the same time, colonial rule was without its criticisms. Many argue that British governance was undemocratic and the political exclusion of the local population during colonial times contributed to a sense of disenfranchisement. The absence of meaning self-government for most of the colonial period remains a controversial issue. The British era also established Hong Kong as one of the world's leading financial centers. Its free market policies, lack of trade barriers, and open port status allowed Hong Kong to flourish as a hub of international trade and finance even after the handover. Hong Kong's economic legacy as a British colony remains evident in its status as a global financial powerhouse. In conclusion of today's episode, what we can take away from this is that the history of Hong Kong as a British colony is a transformation from a small fishing village on the coast of the People's Republic of China to a global financial and trading center. The British period was marked by both opportunities and challenges. It brought economic growth and modernization, but also exclusion and social inequalities. The legacy of British rule continues to influence Hong Kong even today, even after its return to Chinese sovereignty in the summer of 1997. Understanding this colonial history is essential to grasp the complexity of Hong Kong's present-day identity and its ongoing relationship with both the People's Republic of China and the big wide world overall. That just about concludes today's episode. Thank you very much for tuning in. It's greatly appreciated. And if history is your thing, then please make sure to subscribe down below. Turn on the notification bell in order to receive regular updates from me. And stay tuned for the next one, because there's definitely more to come in the foreseeable future. This has been yours truly, B9400, signing off for today. Thanks a lot.